A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
You can imagine, with the war-torn environment in Ukraine, that Christian radio can play an amazing role encouraging people. The International Broadcast Ministry of FEBC have announced that authorities have extended FEBC's Kiev provisional licence issued at the start of the war with Russia. Janet Cousens is the new to the role National Director of FEBC in Australia. Janet, a special welcome along to 2020.
Thank you, Neil.
First of all, Janet, welcome to the new role. This is something you're no doubt going to grow into, but FEBC, a fabulous organisation, and congratulations on taking the helm.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Let's talk Ukraine, because Christian radio, war-torn Ukraine, these things go hand in hand because it's not always as easy to reach into those homes where people are obviously in a war-torn environment and suffering all sorts of things, PTSD and the lack of normal life that they perhaps were used to. Give us your insights here into what's happened with this new licence.
Neil, thank you. We're very excited. Our partner, FEBC Ukraine, has been granted a 10-year licence to broadcast from the city of Kiev, which is an unprecedented granting of a broadcast licence. And so that adds to the excitement that our partner is feeling, which is incredibly important as they serve their nation in what's now, we're going into the third year of war. So what this means is that FEBC in the Ukraine is guaranteed to be able to continue to broadcast the gospel for 10 years, and they believe that the audience reach for that's possible through this new licence is up to about 5 million listeners.
So authorities in Ukraine have, it sounds to me, been welcoming of Christian broadcast because there is an effect on people who hear the encouragement that comes through the airwaves when it's a Christian broadcaster like FEBC.
Neil, that's right. We feel that there's favour there, and there's also recognition that the work that FEBC is doing is integral to the spiritual as well as the social fabric of the people of Ukraine as they, they wear the trauma and the pain of war.
Janet, have you got any idea what it sounds like when you've got FEBC on air in Ukraine? Because as we understand it, a war-torn environment, no doubt people are interested in update news. They're also interested in that Christian ministry that ministers into the heart of a people who might have had their hope stolen away in some sense and their livelihoods stolen away, finding themselves in dreadful circumstance. What does Christian radio sound like for a Ukraine audience?
Neil, our prayer is that Christian radio sounds like hope. A balm in a war-torn environment. Our partner, FEBC Ukraine, is focused on broadcasting the gospel. They're also focused on reaching out to members of the society who are really struggling because of the war, in particular women who have lost their husbands, families who are looking at adopting children who've been orphaned in the war, and men in particular who are serving in the Ukraine army and often at the point of despair. So the message is the pure gospel message, but there's also specific programs that they are producing that they're able to broadcast that deal with family issues like stress, separation, domestic violence, blended families, to bring hope, but also to bring resources to people that are struggling. The radio station is also very focused on connecting with listeners. So there are teams of people that receive calls or letters from listeners, and their efforts are around connecting those listeners in churches where they might not be churches. We've got beautiful stories of the teams in the radio station being able to lead people to Christ. and for others to be able to connect them into services that might assist them. For example, one program that works with families looking at adoption, connecting them into other families that might be fostering children so that they can take that journey together.
How are those Kiev listeners going to be hearing the FEBC broadcast? FEBC, for listeners, has been known as one of those huge broadcasters that can blanket the globe with shortwave radio. That's the way FEBC became known over the decades gone by. But with all of the technology, and no doubt you've been keeping up with that technology and all sorts of new ways to reach people, but how are people going to be hearing this broadcast in Kiev?
Yes. So shortwave radio is definitely our foundation in our history. But in Kiev and in greater Ukraine, a lot of the ministry happens through online media, through FM and AM radio, so more modern technologies, as well social media. There's ministry through YouTube. And in fact, at different stages of the war, several of the broadcasters have actually been broadcasting, for example, from their mobile phones down in bunkers as they have had to flee the radio broadcasting station. So the team there are incredibly agile and very linked into new technologies, and they're using whatever they can to reach people at the battlefront, in their homes, in their workplaces.
Janet, I don't know how well you know any of the team on the ground in Kiev, in Ukraine, but they are people that are likely to have lost their own family members or have suffered the effects of war, and they've been faithful enough to continue to do their work in producing radio programs to encourage their nation. Do you know anything much about the team that's working on the ground there?
Thanks, Neil. About 3 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to meet a gentleman called Edward, who is currently in Ukraine overseeing the work of the radio ministry there. He's an extraordinary young man who asked us for his prayer. He particularly is asking us for prayer for the team. Everybody on the team has lost somebody in this war. And so he is nurturing his own team through their grief journey, as well as supporting them to broadcast to those that are suffering. Edward is a very inspiring young man, very dedicated and very, very committed to sharing the love of Christ in this dark place.
Now, you mentioned the station in Kiev. It'll be covering as many as 5 or 6 million people. There is a fundraiser that's in play right now, and for listeners to be a participant in that and perhaps, a part of a generous gift, you've got a goal of $95,000. Is that where the goal is right now? Because you've got some critical improvements to make on restructuring some antennas. You want to make this thing really work so well. How do you describe what people will be giving to?
Thank you. Yes, we are wanting to raise funds to support FEBC Ukraine to maintain the infrastructure that they need to continue to broadcast under this license, but also to pay for the salaries of the staff that are living and breathing the mission of broadcast within their own country, and also to provide teams of counsellors who are working one-on-one with people that approach the radio station or approach the local churches with very practical needs. So we would really welcome any Australians who feel moved to be part of this ministry to go to our website. That's febc.org.au. We can also call our toll-free number 1300 720 017.
And of course, a local radio station in a town like Kiev no doubt becomes like the mortar between the bricks for Christian ministries that are operating. There are a lot of Christian ministries operating on the ground in Ukraine, and Kiev, one of the main cities. Radio works a bit like that, doesn't it, in supporting the local ministries that are working with the people.
That's right. And FEBC Ukraine particularly works to support the local churches as well as the local ministries. So I love your picture of the mortar and the bricks. It's perfect.
Well, Janet, let me point listeners to how they can support your appeal to ensure the ongoing and updating those restructuring issues around antennas, those critical improvements. You want to improve the quality and the signal reach in Kiev, in Ukraine. You want batteries and you want other equipment too in this appeal. Your immediate goal is $95,000. And for listeners to connect with Janet Cousens, the National Director of FEBC Australia, here's the website, febc.org.au. febc.org.au. Janet, thank you so much for the update and God's richest blessing on the good work of FEBC in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.